Blood stained the snowy courtyard when Rosaline traded her life for her sister's, offering herself to the most terrifying werewolf warlord in the northern reaches. She expected brutality, imprisonment, and death. But on their wedding night, the monster leaned close and breathed a secret that shattered her entire world. Winter had come early to Oakhaven, bringing with it a bitter frost that seemed to mirror the dread settling over the Harrington household. Rosaline Harrington stood by the frost-webbed window of their modest chamber, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the heavy woolen shawl around her younger sister's shoulders. Clara was weeping, her quiet, broken sobs echoing in the drafty room. Today was the day of the tribute, the wretched treaty established by High Magistrate Willem Redcliffe to keep the human settlements safe from the Iron Claw Pack. Every decade, a daughter of noble blood was offered to the Pack's Alpha to secure the borders. This year, the magistrate's cruel lottery had fallen upon Clara. Rosaline brushed a stray lock of pale blonde hair from Clara's tear-streaked face. She was too fragile, too gentle for the likes of Caelan Donovan, the warlord whose name alone was used to frighten children into obedience. Tales of Caelan painted him as a savage, a beast who ripped men apart with his bare hands and bathed his stronghold in the blood of his enemies. Clara would not survive a week in his brutal world. Downstairs, the heavy oak doors of the manor groaned open, followed by the heavy, synchronized thud of armored boots. The wolves had arrived. Rosaline took a deep, steadying breath, suppressing the icy spike of terror in her own chest. She grasped Clara's hands, forcing her sister to look into her eyes. "Do not speak, Clara. No matter what happens in the Great Hall today, keep your head bowed and do exactly as I say. I will not let them take you." Escorted by two of the magistrate's nervous guards, the sisters descended the grand staircase. The Great Hall was suffocatingly tense. High Magistrate Willem stood near the hearth, his velvet robes looking absurdly lavish against the raw, primal energy that now occupied the room. Standing opposite him were 5 men, though calling them mere men felt like a gross underestimation. They were massive, clad in dark furs and hardened leather, moving with a predatory grace that made the human guards look like clumsy children. At their center stood Caelan Donovan. He was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and radiating a terrifying, quiet authority. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, falling around a face composed of sharp, aristocratic angles marred by a jagged, faded scar across his left cheekbone. His eyes, however, were the most unsettling part of him, a piercing, unnatural shade of amber that seemed to strip away all pretense and peer directly into a person's soul. When those eyes locked onto the descending sisters, Clara let out a stifled whimper and shrank behind Rosaline. High Magistrate Willem stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. "Lord Donovan, as agreed by the ancient Treaty of Oakhaven, I present to you the tribute, Clara of the House Harrington. In exchange for her hand, the Iron Claw Pack will honor the northern borders for another 10 winters." Caelan said nothing. He slowly approached the sisters, his heavy boots making no sound against the stone floor. The sheer heat radiating from his body was palpable. He looked down at Clara, who was shaking violently, her eyes squeezed shut in sheer terror. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cold, predatory indifference. "This is the tribute?" Caelan's voice was a deep, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate in the very stones of the hall. "She looks as though a stiff breeze would break her in two." Willem swallowed hard. "She is of noble blood, Lord Donovan. That is all the treaty demands." Before Caelan could respond, Rosaline stepped sideways, firmly inserting herself between the towering Alpha and her weeping sister. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Even the magistrate's guards subtly stepped back, expecting the werewolf to tear her throat out for the insolence. "My sister is not meant for the harshness of the northern reaches, my lord," Rosaline said, forcing her voice to remain steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She tilted her chin up, meeting Caelan's blazing amber gaze without blinking. "She will be of no use to you. She cannot endure the cold. She knows nothing of your ways, and she will only be a burden to your pack." Caelan tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. A dangerous, low rumble emanated from his chest. "And you suggest I break the treaty, human? Should I leave this hall empty-handed and let my pack tear through Oakhaven tonight instead?" "No," Rosaline replied, her voice ringing out clearly in the silent hall. "I am offering a substitution. I am Rosaline Harrington, the elder sister. I share the same noble blood. I am stronger, I am older, and I do not break easily. Take me instead of Clara. High Magistrate Willem sputtered in outrage. Rosaline, you speak out of turn. The lottery selected. Clara, you cannot simply— Quiet, Kaelin commanded, not looking away from Rosaline. The single word silenced the magistrate instantly. The Alpha took a step closer to Rosaline, invading her space, testing her resolve. She held her ground, refusing to look away, though the scent of pine, snow, and something dangerously wild clouded her senses. For a long, agonizing moment, the hall was dead silent. Kaelin's amber eyes scoured her face, searching for deception, searching for fear. He found the fear, certainly, but beneath it, he saw an ironclad defiance that intrigued him. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of his lips. Very well, Kaelin declared, turning his back on the magistrate. The elder sister will suffice. Gather your things, Rosaline Harrington. We ride for Winterbourne Keep before the sun sets. Clara clung to Rosaline, weeping with a mixture of immense relief and profound grief. But Rosaline only hugged her tightly, whispering assurances she didn't truly believe. She had saved her sister, but in doing so, she had sold herself to a monster. As she turned to head upstairs to pack her meager belongings, she caught Kaelin Donovan watching her from the shadows of the hall, his amber eyes burning with an intense, unreadable fire that sent a violent shiver down her spine. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets as the procession left Oakhaven behind. Rosaline was seated on a massive, dark-coated steed, riding just behind Kaelin. The journey into the northern reaches was grueling. The cold was a living, breathing entity that gnawed at her bones, despite the heavy fur cloak Kaelin had roughly tossed to her before they departed. Throughout the long ride, Rosaline observed her captors. The Ironclaw pack did not speak much, communicating instead through sharp gestures and low whistles. They were highly disciplined, functioning with a terrifying synchronicity. Whenever the harsh terrain caused Rosaline's horse to stumble, one of the riders was immediately there to steady the beast, their movements fluid and protective rather than threatening. It was a stark contrast to the mindless beasts the stories back home had claimed them to be. Kaelin rode at the front, an immovable force against the blizzard. He did not look back at her, yet Rosaline felt an acute awareness tethering them together. She knew her life was entirely in his hands now. She had traded the safety of her home for the bed of a warlord, fully expecting to live the rest of her days as a captive, a plaything for a creature of the night. By nightfall, the imposing silhouette of Winterbourne Keep emerged from the blizzard. It was a sprawling, ancient fortress carved directly into the side of a jagged mountain, glowing with the warm light of 1,000 torches. As they rode through the heavy iron gates, the courtyard erupted into activity. Dozens of people, some entirely human, others with distinct lupine traits, rushed forward to take the horses and greet the returning warriors. Rosaline was immediately ushered inside by 2 elderly women who practically dragged her toward the upper chambers. The wedding, it seemed, was not to be delayed. The Alpha does not wait, one of the women muttered, her hands moving deftly as she stripped Rosaline of her freezing, snow-dampened travel clothes. She was bathed in steaming water infused with pine and harsh herbs, then dressed in a simple, elegant gown of deep crimson velvet. It was not a traditional bridal gown, but in the northern reaches, survival and warmth trumped delicate lace. The ceremony took place in the central courtyard, under the light of a swollen, pale moon. It was a raw, primal affair. There were no priests, no long sermons. Kaelin, now dressed in a dark tunic that emphasized the sheer breadth of his chest, stood waiting by a burning brazier. High Magistrate Willem was not there to oversee this. It was just the pack, acting as witnesses to their lord's binding. Kaelin took her hand. His skin was incredibly hot, his calloused fingers wrapping securely around her trembling ones. An elder of the pack stepped forward, holding a silver blade and a chalice. A shallow cut was made on Kaelin's palm, then on Rosaline's. When he pressed his bleeding hand against hers, a jolt of raw electricity shot up her arm, stealing her breath. Blood bound to blood. The pack erupted into a deafening chorus of howls that echoed off the mountain, signifying the completion of the pact. She was now the Alpha's mate. The true terror, however, began when the heavy oak doors of the master bedchamber closed, leaving Rosaline utterly alone with her new husband. The room was vast, warmed by a massive stone fireplace, but the heat did nothing to stop the violent shaking of her hands. Rosaline stood rigidly near the center of the rug, staring at the floor. Kalen moved slowly, shedding his heavy fur mantle and unbuckling the sword at his hip. The metallic clatter of the weapon hitting the wooden table made Rosaline flinch. He noticed. He stopped moving and turned to look at her. The silence in the room stretched until it felt like a physical weight pressing down on her lungs. "You are afraid," Kalen stated. It wasn't a question, but a factual observation, his voice low and rumbling. "I am aware of my fate, my lord," Rosaline answered, forcing herself to look up and meet his amber eyes, just as she had in the Great Hall. "I am your property now. A bargaining chip. Do with me what you will." Kalen closed the distance between them with terrifying speed, stopping mere inches from her. Rosaline squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the brutal touch of a monster claiming his prize. She waited for him to tear the velvet dress, to force her onto the bed, to assert his dominance. Instead, she felt the gentle, surprisingly tender brush of his knuckles against her cheek. Her eyes snapped open in shock. Kalen was looking down at her not with the cruel hunger of a beast, but with a profound, simmering intensity that defied every rumor she had ever heard. He leaned in closer, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear, sending a flurry of goosebumps down her neck. When he spoke, his voice was a soft, ragged whisper, meant only for her. "You think this was an accident, little bird?" he breathed. "You think you tricked me today by taking your sister's place?" Rosaline froze, her mind racing. "I don't understand." Kalen pulled back just enough to look into her wide, bewildered eyes. A dark, possessive smile graced his lips. "Magistrate Willem is a fool," Kalen murmured, his thumb tracing her jawline. "I have no need for a fragile, weeping child like Clara. I never did. 6 months ago, I was scouting the borders in my wolf form. I saw a human woman in the Oakhaven market, standing between a corrupt tax collector and an old beggar, wielding a rusted iron poker and threatening to break the collector's skull if he didn't back down. I saw fire. I saw a queen fit for the northern reaches." Rosaline's breath hitched as the memory slammed into her. The giant, terrifying black wolf she had seen watching from the edge of the woods that day. She had thought it was a trick of the light. "I rigged the magistrate's miserable lottery," Kalen confessed, his amber eyes burning with a fierce, unwavering devotion. "I applied the pressure. I demanded the tribute, all to force their hand. But I knew your nature, Rosaline. I knew you would never let your sister be taken. I knew you would step forward." He stepped back, offering her a respectful bow of his head. "I did not accept a substitute today. I forced you to come to me because I chose you." Dawn broke over Winterbourne Keep, painting the snow-capped jagged peaks in brilliant hues of violet and bruised orange. Rosaline awoke in the massive 4-poster bed, the heavy furs drawn up to her chin. For a fleeting, disorienting second, she believed she was back in her drafty room in Oakhaven. Then, the heavy scent of pine and raw, untamed wilderness flooded her senses, anchoring her to the reality of the northern reaches. Kalen's confession from the night before echoed in her mind. "I forced you to come to me because I chose you." He was not in the room. The space beside her on the mattress was cold, suggesting he had left hours ago. Rosaline pushed herself up, her crimson velvet gown pooling around her. She was a captive who had suddenly been declared a queen, a pawn who had unknowingly been the prize all along. Yet, she was not naive enough to believe a single declaration of desire erased the immense danger she was in. She was a fragile human in a fortress of apex predators. She found a fresh dress of deep emerald wool left for her, along with soft leather boots suited for the icy stone floors. As she ventured out of the bedchamber, the sheer scale of Winterbourne Keep became apparent. Ancient tapestries depicting giant wolves battling shadow creatures lined the walls, and the crackle of massive hearths echoed through the corridors. When she reached the Great Hall, a heavy silence instantly fell over the room. Dozens of eyes, some human, many glowing with that unnatural, predatory amber locked onto her. Kalen sat at the head of a long, scarred wooden table, conferring with 3 imposing figures. The moment he saw her, the terrifying warlord who struck fear into the hearts of men stood up, offering her his chair. The gesture sent a palpable shockwave through the room. Alphas did not yield their seats. "Rosaline," Kalen greeted, his gravelly voice remarkably soft. He gestured to a silver-haired woman sitting to his right, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp as glass. "This is Lady Catherine Howard. one of our oldest pack elders and keeper of our lore. And to my left is Lord Henry Fitzroy, an envoy from the Eastern Marches. Lady Catherine offered a smile that did not reach her eyes. It was a calculated, thoroughly political expression. The human mate, Catherine purred, her gaze raking over Rosaline with thinly veiled disdain. We have heard much of Oakhaven's generosity. Let us hope your constitution is stronger than your sister's was rumored to be. The winters here tear the weak apart. My constitution is fine, Lady Catherine, Rosaline replied evenly, refusing to look away or show intimidation. It takes more than a cold wind to break me. Kaelin's lips twitched upward into a proud smirk. Lord Henry Fitzroy, a human man draped in opulent silks that seemed entirely out of place in the rugged keep, chuckled nervously. Fitzroy was a historical ally of Oakhaven, a man whose real name and private dealings were well documented in the magistrate's ledger of debts. Rosaline recognized him instantly from the times he had visited her father before their family fell into ruin. Indeed, Lady Rosaline is known for her resilience, Fitzroy said, raising his goblet. We are thrilled that this union brings peace. Magistrate Willem sends his highest regards, Lord Donovan, and hopes the tribute pleases you. Rosaline's stomach churned at the mention of Willem. The High Magistrate had eagerly offered Clara to the wolves, and Fitzroy's presence here felt less like a diplomatic mission and more like a surveillance operation. As the day progressed, Kaelin kept her close, integrating her into the daily operations of the keep. She watched him issue orders, settle disputes, and train his warriors. He was brutal, but fiercely just. He did not rule by mindless terror as the stories claimed, but by an unshakable code of honor that demanded loyalty and punished betrayal with swift, lethal efficiency. However, beneath the surface of the pack's unified front, Rosaline sensed a dangerous undercurrent. Lady Catherine Howard watched Kaelin with a critical, calculating eye, and her interactions with Lord Henry Fitzroy were frequent and hushed. Late that afternoon, while navigating the keep's sprawling library to find a map of the surrounding territories, Rosaline slipped into a narrow alcove as she heard footsteps approaching. Through the crack between two towering bookshelves, she saw Catherine and Fitzroy. "The Alpha grows weak," Catherine hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "He alters our traditions for a human girl. He yielded his seat. He brings her to the War Council. It is an insult to the bloodline." "Patience, my lady," Fitzroy murmured smoothly, handing Catherine a small wax-sealed vial. "Willem promised you control of the northern reaches if Donovan is removed. The magistrate cares not who leads the wolves, only that they are easily controlled. Use this at the banquet tonight. It is tasteless. A few drops in his ale, and the Alpha will fall. You will take your rightful place as the leader of the Iron Claw, and Oakhaven will recognize your sovereignty." Rosaline clamped her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. Betrayal. High Magistrate Willem had never intended for this peace treaty to last. He had used the tribute as a Trojan horse, sending Fitzroy to coordinate Kaelin's assassination with a dissenting elder. Clara had been chosen because she was weak, meant to distract Kaelin while the poisoners did their work. By stepping in, Rosaline had unknowingly walked directly into the center of a political assassination plot. She waited until the conspirators left the library before sprinting back toward the royal chambers. Her mind raced with terrifying possibilities. If Kaelin died, she would be slaughtered immediately. But more than self-preservation, a fierce, protective instinct flared in her chest. Kaelin had spared her sister. He had chosen her. He had looked at her with a reverence she had never experienced in her life. She would not let him be murdered in his own hall. Torches blazed brightly against the encroaching twilight as the great hall was prepared for the evening feast. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of roasted meats, spiced wine, and the heavy musk of the pack. Rosaline sat at Kaelin's right hand, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, though she maintained a mask of calm composure. She watched the servants move about the room, her eyes darting constantly toward Lord Henry Fitzroy and Lady Catherine Howard, who sat opposite them, conversing in low tones. Kaelin leaned close to her, the heat of his massive body radiating through her velvet gown. "You are tense, little bird," he murmured, his breath brushing her neck. "Your pulse is racing. Do my people frighten you that much?" "It is not your people who frighten me, Kaelin," Rosaline whispered back, boldly using his first name for the first time. The intimacy of it made his amber eyes flare with sudden, possessive heat. "It is the guests in your home." Before she could explain further, The hall quieted as a servant approached the high table, carrying a silver tray bearing two ornate iron chalices. Traditional spiced ale, a staple of the northern reaches to toast a new union. The servant, a young boy with nervous eyes, placed one chalice before Kaelin and the other before Rosaline. Lady Catherine raised her own goblet, her silver hair catching the firelight. "To our Alpha," she declared, her voice carrying over the silence. "And to his new mate. May this union bring the strength our pack so desperately needs." The room erupted in a chorus of cheers and low howls. Kaelin reached for his chalice, his eyes locked on Rosaline, offering a silent, intense promise of the night to come. He brought the heavy iron rim to his lips. "No!" Rosaline's voice shattered the celebratory air. Moving with a speed born of pure adrenaline, she lunged across the table and swatted the chalice from Kaelin's grip. The heavy cup clattered violently against the stone floor, the dark ale spilling across the rugs and sizzling menacingly as it hit the edges of the open hearth. Dead silence fell over the great hall. Every werewolf in the room rose to their feet, their eyes flashing amber and gold, a collective growl rumbling in their chests at the perceived attack on their alpha. Kaelin did not move, but his gaze dropped to the spilled ale, then snapped to Rosaline, his expression darkening into something terrifyingly primal. "Explain yourself," Kaelin commanded, his voice deadly quiet. "It is poisoned," Rosaline declared, her voice trembling but loud enough for the entire hall to hear. She pointed directly at Lord Henry Fitzroy, whose face had drained of all color, and then at Lady Catherine. High Magistrate Willem orchestrated this. Fitzroy brought the poison from Oakhaven, and Lady Catherine agreed to administer it to usurp you. I heard them in the library. Pandemonium erupted. Fitzroy scrambled backward, drawing a hidden dagger from his opulent robes, but he was entirely outmatched. Lady Catherine, however, did not cower, her face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Her eyes shifted to a glowing, sickly yellow, and the sound of her bones cracking and reforming echoed sickeningly through the hall. In seconds, the elder woman transformed into a massive, grizzled gray wolf, lunging directly across the table at Rosaline. Kaelin roared a sound that shook the very foundations of Winterbourne Keep. He didn't even bother to transform. Moving faster than the human eye could track, he intercepted the gray wolf mid-air. The collision of bodies shattered the heavy wooden table into splinters. Kaelin's hands, now tipped with lethal, elongated claws, gripped Catherine's throat, slamming her brutally into the stone floor. "Treason!" Kaelin bellowed, his voice laced with the terrifying supernatural dominance of an alpha command. The sheer force of his presence brought every other wolf in the room to their knees, submitting instantly to his raw power. Fitzroy tried to run for the heavy oak doors, but two of Kaelin's loyal guards tackled him, pinning the shrieking human to the ground and disarming him with ease. Kaelin stood over the defeated, trembling form of Lady Catherine, his chest heaving, his amber eyes burning with a lethal fire. He looked back at Rosaline, who stood among the wreckage of the high table, her hands clutching the edges of her dress, terrified but unbroken. "Is this true?" Kaelin demanded, looking down at the gray wolf pinned beneath his boot. Catherine shifted back into her human form, coughing up blood, her eyes filled with defiant hatred. "You are weak," Catherine spat. "You bend our ways for a human. Willem promised us autonomy if we removed you. The humans fear you, Donovan. They will never stop hunting you. I did what I had to do to save the Iron Claw. You sold us to a corrupt magistrate," Kaelin corrected coldly. He turned to his guards. "Take them to the dungeons. They will face the pack's justice at dawn." As the traitors were dragged away, the tension in the great hall slowly ebbed, leaving behind a heavy, stunned silence. The servants rushed forward to clear the wreckage, keeping their heads bowed respectfully. Kaelin stood amidst the splintered wood and spilled food, his chest rising and falling heavily. Slowly, his elongated claws retracted, and the lethal fury in his eyes softened as he looked at his new bride. He stepped over the debris, closing the distance between them. He reached out, his massive, calloused hands gently framing her face. Rosaline leaned into his touch, the adrenaline fading and leaving her shaking violently in its wake. "You saved my life," Kaelin whispered, awe lacing his deep voice. "You stood in a hall full of monsters, unarmed, and you protected me." "I told you," Rosaline murmured, a watery, breathless laugh escaping her lips as she looked up into his intense amber eyes. I do not break easily, and I do not let the people I care about get hurt. Kalen's breath hitched. He pulled her against his chest, burying his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent as if it were the only thing grounding him to reality. Willem will pay for this, Kalen promised, his voice vibrating against her collarbone. He sent an assassin into my home under the guise of peace. He endangered you. I will tear Oakhaven down to its foundations. Rosaline wrapped her arms around his waist, holding tightly to the warlord who had become her fierce protector. The political landscape of the northern reaches had just fractured, and a brutal war with the human settlements was now inevitable. But as she stood in the ruins of the banquet hall, held fiercely in the arms of the cruel Alpha who had chosen her above all others, Rosaline knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The real battle was only just beginning. Vengeance burned in the hearts of the Ironclaw pack as dawn broke over Winterbourne Keep. News of High Magistrate Willem's treacherous assassination attempt spread through the stronghold like wildfire, transforming the previously quiet courtyard into a chaotic staging ground for war. Armor clashed. Swords were sharpened against grinding stones, and the deep, resonant howls of wolves preparing for bloodshed echoed off the jagged mountain peaks. Rosaline stood on the balcony overlooking the preparations, her heart heavy but her resolve made of iron. She was no longer the frightened tribute who had arrived merely a day ago. She was the Alpha's mate, a woman who had stood her ground against a monstrous betrayal. Kalen emerged from the heavy oak doors, his imposing figure clad in blackened steel and thick furs. He climbed the stone steps to the balcony, his amber eyes softening only when they landed on her. "We ride within the hour," Kalen rumbled, stopping beside her and resting a heavy, gauntleted hand on the stone balustrade. "My scouts intercepted a raven from Oakhaven this morning. Willem knows the assassination failed. He has barricaded the city and done the unthinkable." Rosaline turned to him, dread pooling in her stomach. "Clara, he has my sister. He has your entire family locked in the magistrate's dungeons," Kalen confirmed, his jaw tightening, but he did not act alone. To fortify Oakhaven, Willem emptied the city's treasury and hired the notorious Captain John Hawkwood. Hawkwood and his private mercenary faction, the White Company, are ruthless killers. It is a historical fact that Hawkwood's men have never lost a fortified siege. Willem believes this human army can slaughter my pack when we arrive. "Then I am riding with you," Rosaline declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. "If Clara is in the dungeons, she will be terrified. I know the hidden passages of the magistrate's manor. I can get her out while your forces engage Hawkwood's mercenaries." Kalen's expression darkened, an instinctive, protective growl vibrating in his chest. "Absolutely not. You will stay here, heavily guarded. Hawkwood's mercenaries show no mercy to women or children. I will not risk you, Rosaline." "You chose a queen, Kalen, not a prisoner," she countered, stepping into his space and placing her hands flat against his steel-clad chest. She forced him to meet her defiant gaze. "You told me you saw fire in me. Do not try to extinguish it now. I am going to save my sister, and I am going to watch Willem fall. We do this together, or I will steal a horse and follow you myself." A long, tense silence stretched between them. The warlord who commanded the most fearsome beasts in the realm stared down at the fragile human woman who held his heart in a vice grip. Slowly, a smirk broke through his severe expression, yielding to a profound, reverent awe. "You are truly terrifying, little bird," he whispered, leaning down to press a fierce, desperate kiss to her forehead. "Fetch your cloak. I will have the armorer fit you with a chainmail vest." The ride back to Oakhaven was a blur of freezing wind and thundering hooves. When they crested the final hill overlooking the settlement, the true scale of Willem's treachery became apparent. Oakhaven was heavily fortified. Hundreds of Hawkwood's seasoned mercenaries patrolled the walls, their crossbows locked and loaded. Kalen did not order a prolonged siege. The Iron Claw Pack did not fight like human armies. They were a force of nature. With a deafening, earth-shattering roar, Kalen shifted. Before Rosaline's eyes, the man she had married transformed into a monstrous, pitch-black wolf the size of a warhorse. His amber eyes burned with supernatural fury. With a collective howl that chilled the blood of every human behind the city walls, the pack charged. Arrows rained down from the battlements, but they bounced harmlessly off the thick, hardened pelts of the transforming werewolves. Kalen led the vanguard, throwing his massive weight against the reinforced timber gates. The woods splintered and groaned under the supernatural assault. Hawkwood's men, despite their infamous reputation and brutal discipline, broke rank in sheer terror as the beasts breached the courtyard. Swords and pikes were useless against the speed and sheer savagery of the Iron Claw. Amidst the chaos, Rosaline slipped through the shadows. Escorted by two of Kaelin's elite guards, she bypassed the main courtyard and entered the manor through the servants' entrance she had used countless times in her youth. The halls were mostly abandoned, the guards having rushed out to face the slaughter. She navigated the winding stone steps down into the damp, dark dungeons. There, cowering in a rusted iron cell, was Clara. "Rosie!" Clara sobbed, rushing to the bars as Rosaline snatched a ring of heavy keys from a slain jailer. "I have you, Clara. I told you I wouldn't let them take you," Rosaline soothed, twisting the heavy iron key until the lock gave way. She pulled her weeping sister into a desperate embrace, her heart finally steadying. A slow, malicious clap echoed through the subterranean corridor. High Magistrate Willem stepped out from the shadows, a loaded crossbow aimed directly at Rosaline's chest. He looked disheveled, his velvet robe stained with soot, but his eyes were wide with crazed desperation. "How touching," Willem sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. "The tribute returns. Hawkwood may be losing the courtyard, but bringing the Alpha's head and his traitorous little bride to the capital will still earn me a lordship. Say goodbye, Rosaline." Before Willem could loose the bolt, a massive shadow detached itself from the ceiling of the stairwell. Kaelin, having tracked his mate's scent through the blood-soaked manor, dropped behind the magistrate in his human form, covered in the gore of battle. Willem didn't even have time to scream. Kaelin's claws extended, slicing cleanly through the crossbow and the magistrate's arm in one swift, brutal motion. Willem collapsed, writhing and shrieking in agony on the cold stone floor. Kaelin stepped over the pathetic, whimpering man, his amber eyes fixed entirely on Rosaline. He was panting, his chest heaving, the violence of the battle still rolling off him in waves of heat. He ignored the bleeding magistrate, dropping to his knees in front of Rosaline and Clara, his hands frantically checking Rosaline for injuries. "Are you hurt?" Kaelin demanded, his voice thick with raw, unrestrained panic. "Did he touch you?" "I am completely fine," Rosaline whispered, cupping his blood-stained face and wiping a streak of dirt from his cheekbone. "Because of you." Kaelin let out a ragged breath, pulling her fiercely against his chest. As the sounds of the dying battle faded above them, leaving only the triumphant howls of the Ironclaw pack, Rosaline looked over Kaelin's shoulder at the broken magistrate. The corrupt reign of Oakhaven was over. She had traded her life to save her sister, expecting to find a monster. Instead, she had found a king, a protector, and a love fierce enough to burn empires to the ground. Did Rosaline's brave sacrifice ignite a new era for humans and wolves, or will the shadows of the northern reaches hide more threats? This tale of medieval romance, fierce loyalty, and betrayal proves that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones disguised as men. If this dramatic werewolf story captured your heart, please smash that like button, share this video with your fellow fantasy lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life-inspired fantasy sagas.